Hello and welcome as we continue our journey this week toward the fourth Sunday after Pentecost, June the 20th, 2021. And just a reminder, if you wish to have a little bit more interaction after you viewed this video, you can leave a comment or question in the comment section under the video on the YouTube channel or under the video on the church's Facebook page. Today we'll be looking at the Gospel according to St. Mark in the fourth chapter, verses 35 through 41. So let me read for you first the introduction to the Gospel, then the Gospel itself, and share with you some of the reflections that I've gathered for today. Jesus' calming of the storm on the sea reveals his power over evil, since the sea represents evil and chaos. The boat on the sea is a symbol of the church and invites us to trust God amidst life's turbulence. When evening had come, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe, and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The Gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. At the beginning of Mark's Gospel, or at least this section of chapter 4, we read that Jesus began to teach beside the sea. Such a very large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat on the sea and sat there, while the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land. He began to teach them many things in parables. Then, following those opening lines of chapter 4, we have this series of parables, presumably with Jesus still speaking from the boat. In today's reading, we learn that evening has come as Jesus has been teaching the crowds, and Jesus, still in the boat, tells the disciples to go across to the other side in verse 35. Crossing to the other side appears to be a literal transition across the Sea of Galilee into Gentile territory, and may also be a metaphor for crossing cultural, social, and perhaps religious and spiritual boundaries. When they reach the other side, Jesus, chapter 5, is immediately met by a man with an unclean spirit, or a demon. Today's gospel indicates that traveling with Jesus as he crosses over to another side is risky. For the disciples in the boat in today's reading, there's a physical storm. The storm is swamping the boat with water as the waves crash over the side. I have not traveled in too many boats, although I think that should I be in a boat in the middle of a storm with the waves crashing over the side, I would be afraid. After all, I grew up watching Gilligan's Island, and we probably all remember how that 3-hour tour turned out. Jesus, on the other hand, is sleeping through the storm. As I'm preparing this Bible study, there have been storms moving through this region of Florida, lightning and thunder, have awakened me in the middle of the night and in the early hours of the morning. Seeing the lightning flashes and hearing the thunder does not scare me, although it does scare my dog, to the point that she cannot decide whether she would rather be on my chest or under the bed. Thankfully, she is only a 12-pound dog. All that is to say that I can appreciate that the disciples are afraid. And I would have sided with them when they woke Jesus and asked him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" It would appear on the surface that Jesus is a heavy sleeper, because I know I could not have slept through all of that. After Jesus calms the storm, he seems to rebuke the disciples in verse 40. "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" I think that in today's vernacular, I might have been the one who responded with, "I'm sorry, what?" Today's reading pairs well with Psalm 107, verses 26 through 28, which talks about getting caught in the storm on the sea. And it reads, "They mounted up to the heavens and descended to the depths. Their souls melted away in their peril. They staggered and reeled like drunkards, and all their skill was to no avail. Then in their trouble they cried to the Lord, and you delivered them from their distress." The people in this psalm, and at least a few of the disciples of Jesus, were experienced sailors. They would not have panicked over a normal storm on the Sea of Galilee. And I imagine the disciples tried everything they could before waking Jesus, and like those in today's psalm, all of their skill was to no avail. One commentator points out that the transition, or the translation actually, in verse 38, where the disciples are asking Jesus, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" is the same wording in Mark 8, verse 35, in which Jesus says those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. And it was the same translation used in Mark 3, verse 6, which reads, "The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him," meaning Jesus, "how to destroy him." Just as the storm does not seem to be normal, the fear of death from the disciples may carry more emphasis than the death of these mortal bodies. Another commentator suggests that the previous parables carries an eschatological or an end times theme. And so the story of the storm at sea has an eschatological or maybe even a cosmic implication. The dangers for the physical death of these bodies are real. And Jesus' question as to whether the disciples still have no faith seems to carry a deeper message. Why include the word still? Did Jesus expect something to have changed for the disciples? And what is it that the disciples are still missing? Jesus' rebuke of the storm has similar language to when Jesus rebukes unclean spirits. So the resemblance to exorcism highlights the extent of the threat of this storm, and also suggests that Jesus' effective rebuke of the wind and the sea is another instance of his power over all evil. God's kingdom authority is powerfully at hand in Jesus. In chapter 5, after they cross over, Jesus heals the man with an unclean spirit, The people are afraid at the sight of the demoniac made whole, and their fear leads them to beg Jesus to leave, go away from us, leave our neighborhood, cross back over to the other side. When Jesus asked the disciples, "Why are you afraid?" was he referring to their fear of the storm or their fear of him? Should we fear the Lord? In the explanations to the Ten Commandments, Martin Luther starts each one with the words, "We are to fear and love the Lord." I think being in the presence of that kind of cosmic authority and power would make fear inevitable. Yet, what seems to matter is what we do in spite of, or maybe even because of that fear, that sense of awe. Traveling with Jesus, following Jesus, will certainly not guarantee us a storm-free life. In fact, Jesus often travels to and leads his disciples to risky places. People with unclean spirits, illnesses which make people unclean or unpopular, crowds of people with a variety of needs, people who challenge Jesus' authority, people who reject Jesus, and so on. When we are called to risk for Jesus' sake and for the sake of the gospel, how will we respond? We know the end of the story. Unlike the disciples in today's reading, we trust that Jesus was victorious in this cosmic battle. Yet, when confronted with the risk of dealing in the here and now with people that Jesus seeks out, will we cry out that we are afraid? If yes, listen again to Jesus' response in today's reading. Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? Thank you again for joining me today as we continue this journey on toward the fourth Sunday after Pentecost, June the 20th, 2021. Again, if you'd like to leave a comment or ask a question, you may do so in the comment section below today's video. I hope you're having a great day. Take care, and God bless.